The lungs clean themselves every single minute of every single day through one of the most sophisticated self-maintenance systems in the human body. But after 50, that system slows down, gets overwhelmed, and begins to need something it was never designed to do alone: active, deliberate support from the person it belongs to. Every breath a person takes after 50 carries something into the lungs: dust particles, pollution molecules, bacteria, fungal spores, allergens, microscopic debris from cooking, cleaning, traffic, and the ordinary indoor environments where most people spend the majority of their time. The lungs have a remarkable built-in system for dealing with all of this, catching it, neutralizing it, and moving it out before it causes damage. But that system, like every biological system, changes with age. It becomes slower, less thorough, less able to keep up with the accumulation. And when it falls behind, the consequences range from increased susceptibility to respiratory infection to persistent low-grade airway inflammation to the acceleration of lung function decline that most people attribute entirely to aging. Today, we are going to talk about 5 specific research-backed things that genuinely support the lung's natural cleaning system. Not detox myths, not miracle supplements, but real biological inputs that make a measurable difference in how well the lungs maintain themselves after 50. The lungs do not need to be detoxed from the outside. They need the specific biological support that allows their own remarkable cleaning system to keep working at full capacity. Think about how much the environment around you has changed over the decades. The air quality in the rooms where you spend most of your time. The products used to clean the house, cook the food, maintain the garden. The cumulative hours of exposure to traffic fumes, secondhand smoke from decades past, dust from renovation projects, chemical fumes from paint and solvents. Most of this exposure was unavoidable and occurred without any thought of what it was depositing in the airways. The lungs handled it, mostly quietly, for decades. But there comes a point, and for most people it arrives somewhere in the 50s, where the handling is no longer quite as effortless as it was. Where the morning cough lingers a little longer, where the chest feels slightly less clear after spending time in a dusty or smoky environment, where recovery from a respiratory illness takes a little more time than it used to. These are the signs that the lung cleaning system needs support, and that support is available, specific, and more powerful than most people have been told. Here is what we are going to cover today. The lung has 3 primary natural cleaning mechanisms: the mucociliary escalator that sweeps inhaled particles out of the airways, the alveolar macrophages that engulf and neutralize debris reaching the deepest lung tissue, and the lymphatic system of the lung that drains immune cells, waste products, and inflammatory debris away from the lung tissue itself. We are going to look at 5 specific natural interventions that support these 3 systems most effectively. What each one does biologically, why it matters specifically for adults over 50, and how to implement it in a way that produces real results. By the end of this video, you will have 5 specific, biologically grounded lung support practices that work with the lung's own cleaning systems, rather than making vague claims about detoxification. Each one is backed by research. Each one is accessible without medical equipment or expensive products. And each one produces measurable benefits for lung health in adults over 50 who apply them consistently. Natural tip number 1: hydration, the most undervalued lung cleaning tool. The first and most consistently underestimated support for the lung's natural cleaning system is the simplest and most available: adequate daily hydration. And the reason most people do not think of drinking water as a lung health intervention is that they have never been told exactly what hydration does inside the respiratory tract, and why its effects on lung cleaning are direct, measurable, and significant. The mucociliary escalator is the lung's primary particle clearance system. It works through a 2-layer system lining the airways from the nose down to the smallest bronchioles. The deeper layer, called the sol layer or periciliary layer, is a thin, watery fluid in which the cilia move freely, beating rhythmically at approximately 1,000 beats per minute to propel the overlying layer upward toward the throat. The overlying layer, the gel layer, is thicker mucus that traps inhaled particles, bacteria, allergens, and debris as they land on the airway surface. The coordinated beating of the cilia in the sol layer moves this particle-laden mucus upward at a rate of approximately 1 centimeter per minute in the larger airways, carrying the trapped debris toward the throat where it is swallowed or expelled, completing the clearance cycle. The efficiency of this entire system depends critically on the water content of both layers. The sol layer must have the precise water content that allows cilia to beat freely and propel the gel layer efficiently. The gel layer must have the water content that gives it the viscosity to trap particles without becoming so thick that the cilia can no longer move it. When systemic hydration is inadequate, when the body is even mildly dehydrated, the airway surface liquid is drawn down in water content. The sol layer thins and loses its lubricating properties. The gel layer thickens and becomes more viscous. Cilia beat against a heavier burden. Their effective clearance rate drops, and particles that should have been swept out in minutes instead remain in the airway for hours, giving bacteria longer to establish colonization, giving inflammatory particles longer to irritate the airway lining, and giving inhaled debris longer to penetrate toward the deeper lung tissue. After 50, the thirst sensation becomes less reliable as a hydration guide. The hypothalamic thirst response is blunted by aging, meaning that adults over 50 can be meaningfully dehydrated without feeling thirsty. This blunted thirst response makes the deliberate habit of consistent fluid intake more important than it was at younger ages, and more important for lung health than most people realize. Research has shown that even mild chronic dehydration, the kind that does not produce obvious thirst or dry mouth, measurably impairs mucociliary clearance rates. And in adults over 50 whose ciliary function is already slightly reduced by age-related changes, the compounding effect of mild chronic dehydration on clearance efficiency is clinically significant. The practical target for most adults over 50 is 6 to 8 cups of fluid daily from all sources: water, herbal teas, broths, and water-rich foods like fruits and vegetables. The simplest indicator of adequate hydration remains urine color. Pale yellow throughout the day indicates adequate hydration, while darker yellow or amber indicates a deficit that the mucociliary system is already compensating for. Warm fluids deserve specific mention because warm water and herbal teas have an additional benefit for airway clearance, beyond their hydration contribution. Warmth dilates the small blood vessels of the airway lining, increasing local circulation and temporarily reducing the viscosity of airway secretions, making them more mobile and easier for the cilia to transport. A cup of warm water or herbal tea in the morning, before the day's physical activity, supports the morning clearance surge that the lung naturally undergoes after hours of lying flat during sleep. Research tracking mucociliary clearance rates in adults over 50 has shown that maintaining adequate hydration improves clearance velocity measurably compared to mild dehydration states. A difference that translates directly into faster removal of inhaled particles and lower respiratory tract exposure to trapped bacteria and allergens. The simplest lung cleaning intervention costs nothing and is available in every kitchen. Natural tip number 2, breathing exercises. Activating the parts of the lung that daily breathing leaves behind. The second natural lung cleaning tip is one that most people have heard of in some form, but have never understood with the biological specificity that makes it genuinely motivating to practice consistently. It is deliberate deep breathing, but not deep breathing as a vague wellness practice. Deep breathing as a specific mechanical intervention that opens the portions of lung tissue that shallow, habitual daily breathing leaves chronically under-ventilated. The lungs are not uniformly ventilated during normal, quiet breathing. Tidal breathing, the shallow, effortless breathing that most people do automatically throughout the day, predominantly ventilates the upper and middle zones of the lung, where the airways are larger and resistance to airflow is lower. The lower zones of the lung, the basal regions where the greatest volume of alveolar tissue is located, receive proportionally less ventilation during tidal breathing, particularly in adults over 50 who spend significant time seated in positions that compress the lower chest and limit diaphragm descent. When alveolar regions are chronically underventilated, several things happen. The surfactant layer that coats the alveolar surface, the detergent-like compound that prevents the tiny air sacs from collapsing, is not refreshed by regular airflow and begins to lose its effectiveness, increasing the tendency for microatelectasis, the partial collapse of small groups of alveoli. Under-ventilated regions accumulate more debris and inflammatory particles than well-ventilated regions, because the normal airflow that helps carry particles toward the mucociliary escalator is reduced. And the alveolar macrophages in under-ventilated regions, the immune cells responsible for engulfing and clearing particles that reach the deepest lung tissue, become less active in low-oxygen microenvironments, reducing their phagocytic effectiveness. Deliberate deep breathing, specifically the practice of slow, full inhalations that expand the lower chest and abdomen, hold the expansion briefly, and then exhale fully, directly addresses all of these consequences. Full inhalation to near total lung capacity opens basal alveolar regions, refreshes their surfactant layer, delivers normal airflow to under-ventilated zones, and activates the mechanical stretch receptors in the alveolar walls that stimulate surfactant production by the type II pneumocytes lining the air sacs. The brief breath hold at full inhalation, 2 to 3 seconds, allows collateral ventilation through the pores of cone, microscopic openings between adjacent alveoli, to distribute air into regions that may be partially collapsed and that direct airflow does not immediately reach. And full exhalation that actively contracts the abdominal muscles to drive the diaphragm upward, compresses the alveoli, and helps express accumulated debris toward the larger airways where the mucociliary escalator can complete the clearance. A practical deep breathing practice for lung cleaning purposes requires only 5 to 10 minutes twice daily. 10 slow, full inhalations through the nose, expanding the lower chest and abdomen fully, held for 2 to 3 seconds at the top, followed by a slow, complete exhalation through pursed lips that gently empties the lungs more fully than normal. This pursed lip exhalation creates a slight back pressure in the airways that helps keep small airways open during exhalation, preventing the premature closure of small bronchioles that is a feature of age-related lung changes and that traps air in already ventilated alveoli while leaving others underinflated. The full cycle takes approximately 30 seconds per breath, making a 10-breath practice a 5-minute investment that research has shown improves peripheral alveolar ventilation, reduces dead space ventilation, and enhances alveolar macrophage activity measurably over weeks of consistent practice. Some people are wondering, is this the same as the breathing exercises recommended after surgery to prevent pneumonia? Yes, and the fact that hospitals use this technique specifically to prevent post-surgical lung complications confirms exactly how powerful deliberate deep breathing is as a tool for maintaining lung hygiene and preventing the alveolar microcollapse that infection exploits. What prevents post-surgical pneumonia also prevents the gradual alveolar underventilation that accumulates silently in sedentary adults over 50. Natural tip number 3, physical activity, the lung's most powerful internal cleaner. The third natural lung cleaning tip is the one with the most comprehensive research evidence and the widest biological reach, because regular physical activity supports every component of the lung's cleaning system simultaneously in ways that no other single intervention replicates. And the mechanism by which exercise cleans the lungs goes far beyond simply breathing harder. It involves specific biological effects on the mucociliary system, the alveolar macrophages, the lymphatic drainage of the lung, and the airway inflammatory environment. During aerobic exercise, ventilation increases dramatically, from the resting rate of approximately 6 to 8 liters per minute to 40, 60, or in well-trained adults over 50, 80 or more liters per minute. This dramatic increase in airflow through the airways produces 2 direct cleaning effects. The first is mechanical. The increased airflow velocity creates greater shear forces on the airway mucus layer, mobilizing secretions that would remain stationary at resting airflow rates and driving them toward the central airways where clearance is most efficient. The second is thermal. The increased ventilation delivers larger volumes of inspired air through the airways, and the warming and humidification of this air by the airway lining draws heat and moisture from the mucosa in a way that temporarily alters the viscosity and mobility of the mucus layer, enhancing its transport properties. Exercise also directly stimulates mucociliary clearance through a neurochemical mechanism. The sympathetic nervous system activation that accompanies aerobic exercise stimulates beta-adrenergic receptors on the ciliated cells of the airway epithelium, increasing ciliary beat frequency measurably above baseline. Research has documented that ciliary beat frequency is significantly elevated during and immediately after aerobic exercise compared to rest, an effect that persists for 30 to 60 minutes after exercise ends, providing a sustained window of enhanced clearance following each bout of physical activity. The alveolar macrophages, the deep lung immune cells responsible for clearing particles that reach the alveoli, are similarly activated by exercise. Physical activity increases pulmonary blood flow and alveolar perfusion, delivering more activated macrophages to the alveolar surface and providing them with the oxygen and metabolic substrates they need for effective phagocytic activity. Research has shown that regular exercisers have more numerous and more functionally active alveolar macrophages than sedentary adults matched for age and smoking history, a difference that translates directly into more effective clearance of inhaled particles, bacteria, and cellular debris from the alveolar surface. The pulmonary lymphatic system, the network of vessels that drains immune cells, interstitial fluid, and debris from the lung tissue, is driven by the mechanical compression and expansion of the lung with each breath. During exercise, the dramatically increased depth and rate of breathing produces proportionally more mechanical pumping of the lymphatic system, increasing lymphatic flow and accelerating the drainage of inflammatory debris, excess fluid, and immune cell waste products from the lung interstitium. In sedentary adults over 50, reduced physical activity reduces this lymphatic pumping, allowing slow accumulation of inflammatory material in the lung interstitium that contributes to the low-grade airway inflammation increasingly documented in aging sedentary populations. The target for lung cleaning benefit from physical activity is modest and achievable. 30 minutes of brisk walking 5 days per week, producing a level of exertion that causes noticeable but comfortable breathlessness, slightly elevated heart rate, and mild sweating, produces the ventilation increase and sympathetic activation needed to drive all of the mechanisms described above. This does not need to be continuous. 2 15-minute sessions produce equivalent lung cleaning benefit to one 30-minute session for the purposes of clearance stimulation. And for adults who are currently less active than this, even 10-minute walks 3 times daily produce measurable improvements in mucociliary clearance rates compared to uninterrupted sitting. Natural tip number 4, anti-inflammatory foods, supporting the lung from the inside. The fourth natural lung cleaning tip operates at the cellular level, supporting the lung's cleaning systems not through mechanical means, but through the nutritional environment in which every cell of the respiratory tract is trying to function. It is the deliberate inclusion of specific anti-inflammatory foods that research has linked to better lung function, more active mucociliary clearance, and more effective alveolar macrophage activity in adults over 50. Chronic low-grade airway inflammation is one of the most significant barriers to effective lung self-cleaning in adults over 50. Inflammatory cytokines in the airway environment directly impair ciliary beat frequency. They reduce the synchronized coordination of ciliary movement that makes the mucociliary escalator effective. They increase the production of excess, poorly hydrated mucus that is thicker and harder for cilia to transport. They impair alveolar macrophage phagocytic function, reducing the effectiveness of deep lung particle clearance. And they maintain the airway in a state of heightened reactivity and narrowing that reduces airflow rates and impairs the mechanical clearance effects of normal ventilation. Reducing this chronic airway inflammation through dietary means is therefore a direct intervention in the lung's cleaning capacity. Not a peripheral wellness gesture, but a specific biological input with specific biological consequences. The foods with the most direct and most consistently documented anti-inflammatory effects on respiratory tissue are those richest in polyphenols, the bioactive plant compounds that modulate inflammatory signaling pathways in the airway epithelium and in alveolar immune cells. Quercetin, found in highest concentrations in onions, apples, and green tea, has specific documented effects on airway inflammation. It inhibits the release of histamine from mast cells in the airways, reduces the production of pro-inflammatory leukotrienes that promote mucus overproduction and bronchoconstriction, and has been shown in research to improve lung function measures in adults with airway inflammatory conditions. Resveratrol, found in grapes, berries, and red wine in modest amounts, activates anti-inflammatory pathways in airway epithelial cells and has been shown to reduce oxidative stress in lung tissue. Curcumin, the active compound of turmeric, directly inhibits the NF-kappa B inflammatory pathway that drives cytokine production in activated airway immune cells. Omega-3 fatty acids from oily fish, salmon, mackerel, sardines, anchovies, and herring deserve specific mention because their anti-inflammatory effects in the respiratory tract are among the most consistently documented in nutritional research on lung health. Omega-3 fatty acids are incorporated into the cell membranes of airway epithelial cells and alveolar macrophages, where they alter the balance of eicosanoids produced by those cells from pro-inflammatory to anti-inflammatory forms. Research tracking adults over 50 has shown that higher dietary omega-3 intake is associated with significantly lower rates of airway inflammation, better preserved lung function over time, and more effective clearance of inhaled particulate matter. The target intake for meaningful lung benefit, 2 to 3 servings of oily fish per week, or a high-quality omega-3 supplement providing at least 1 gram of combined EPA and DHA daily, is specific and achievable. Green leafy vegetables deserve inclusion not only for their polyphenol content, but for their nitrate content. Dietary nitrates from spinach, rocket, kale, and similar vegetables are converted in the body to nitric oxide, which dilates the small airways of the lung, reduces airway resistance, and improves ventilation distribution to the peripheral lung zones that are most dependent on low airway resistance for adequate ventilation. Research has shown that dietary nitrate from vegetables measurably improves lung function measures and exercise capacity in adults over 50, an effect that has specific relevance for the exercise-driven lung cleaning described in Tip 3, because better ventilated lungs exercise more comfortably, which supports longer and more effective exercise sessions. Before today, did you know that specific foods, oily fish, onions, apples, green leafy vegetables, and turmeric, were directly supporting or impairing your lung's natural cleaning system through specific biological pathways in the airway cells themselves? Drop a yes or no in the comments, and tell me which food from today's list you are going to start including more deliberately this week. Natural tip number 5, reducing indoor air pollution, protecting what the cleaning system has to work against. The 5th natural lung cleaning tip is the one that changes the fundamental math of lung cleaning, because the best mucociliary escalator in the world cannot keep pace indefinitely if the rate of new particle deposition keeps exceeding the rate of clearance. Reducing the burden of what the lungs have to clean is as important as improving their cleaning efficiency. And for most adults over 50, the most significant and most actionable source of lung burden is not outdoor air pollution, but the air quality inside their own home. Indoor air quality is consistently measured as worse than outdoor air quality in the majority of homes where specific pollutant measurements are taken, sometimes dramatically worse. This counterintuitive finding is the result of the concentration of multiple pollution sources within an enclosed space with limited air exchange. Cooking, particularly high-heat methods such as frying, grilling, and stir-frying, produces particulate matter, acrolein, nitrogen dioxide, and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons at concentrations that can briefly exceed outdoor pollution levels in a poorly ventilated kitchen. Gas cooking produces additional nitrogen dioxide from combustion. Candles and incense produce fine particulate matter and volatile organic compounds that penetrate deeply into the alveolar regions of the lung. Cleaning products, particularly spray format products containing bleach, ammonia, and volatile organic compounds, generate aerosols that remain airborne in enclosed spaces for 30 minutes or more after use, depositing reactive chemical compounds on airway surfaces throughout that window. Synthetic fragrance products, including air fresheners, fabric softeners, and scented candles, release terpenes and phthalates that react with indoor ozone to form secondary pollutants including formaldehyde, a direct airway irritant and documented ciliary toxin. After 50, the combination of spending more time indoors, particularly in retirement, and having a slightly less efficient mucociliary system to handle the indoor pollution load makes the indoor air quality conversation more urgent than most people realize. The practical interventions are specific and achievable. Using exhaust ventilation during and for 15 minutes after cooking removes the majority of cooking-generated pollutants before they disperse into living areas. Opening windows for 20 to 30 minutes daily when outdoor air quality permits dilutes the accumulated concentration of indoor volatile organic compounds that build up in modern, well-insulated homes. Replacing spray cleaning products with liquid or paste formats eliminates the aerosol deposition that spray formats generate. Choosing fragrance-free or naturally scented personal care and cleaning products removes one of the most consistent, ongoing sources of indoor volatile organic compound loading. And avoiding burning candles and incense in poorly ventilated indoor spaces eliminates one of the highest fine particulate sources that most people never connect to lung health. Indoor plants are a topic that frequently appears in lung health discussions and deserve honest treatment. While plants do absorb certain volatile organic compounds through their leaves and root soil systems, the rate of removal by a realistic number of indoor plants is too slow to meaningfully reduce indoor pollutant concentrations in a normally furnished, normally occupied home. Research measuring actual pollutant reduction by indoor plants in realistic settings has consistently found the effect to be modest to negligible at achievable plant densities. Plants are beneficial for indoor air quality in many ways. They add humidity, they are associated with reduced psychological stress, and they provide a genuine connection to nature. But they are not an alternative to ventilation and source reduction for managing indoor air pollutants. The air quality investment with the most direct and most validated benefit for lung cleaning support is the management of what enters the indoor air in the first place, through cooking practices, cleaning product choices, and daily ventilation habits, combined with the 4 active lung support practices already described. Together, these 5 approaches form a complete, coherent, research-grounded strategy for supporting the lung's natural cleaning systems at every level of their operation, from the sole layer of the mucociliary escalator to the phagocytic activity of the alveolar macrophages, to the lymphatic drainage of the lung interstitium. Research has shown that adults over 50 who combine adequate hydration, regular breathing exercises, consistent aerobic activity, and anti-inflammatory dietary patterns show measurably better preserved mucociliary clearance rates and lung function decline trajectories than those who do none of these things, with the greatest benefit seen when multiple practices are combined, rather than any single one applied alone. The lungs respond to being taken care of, and the response is measurable in the most direct biological terms. Before we wrap up, we'd like to gently remind you, everything shared in today's video is for educational purposes only and is not a substitute for personal medical advice from your own doctor, who knows your full history and individual health picture. Please always consult your healthcare provider for guidance specific to you. I want to hear from you. Out of these 5 tips, hydration, deep breathing exercises, physical activity, anti-inflammatory foods, and reducing indoor air pollution, which one surprised you most today? Which one are you going to start this week? Drop it in the comments. And if someone you care about has been looking for simple, science-backed ways to support their lung health, a partner, a parent, a friend who has been noticing their breathing is not quite what it was, please share this video with them. The lungs are quietly extraordinary. They deserve to be supported with the same quiet consistency. Breathe deeply, drink water, move, eat well, and I will see you in the next one.